Hi there. It's December 22nd and time for Luke 22 in our Christmas through Luke series. There's only 3 chapters left, so let's jump over there and we'll get into it. Now they arrived at Jerusalem. And the festival of unleavened bread, which is also called Passover, was approaching. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were plotting how to kill Jesus, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. Right. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted, and they promised to give him money. So he agreed and began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him when the crowds weren't around. That's what he says about Judas being betrayed. This is Luke's version. The Last Supper. Now the festival of unleavened bread arrived, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead and said, "Go and prepare a Passover meal so we can eat together." "Where do you want us to prepare it?" they asked him. He replied, "As soon as you run to Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him. At the house he enters, say to the owner, 'The teacher asked, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. That is where you should prepare our meal." They went out to the city and found everything just as he had said, and they prepared a Passover meal there. Now, do you think this was the rich man who Jesus loved, who went away sad? Could have been. Could have been. Doesn't say, but I like to think maybe it was. When the time came, Jesus and the apostles sat down together at the table. Jesus said, "I have been eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins, for I tell you now that I won't eat this meal again until its meaning is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." And they had this once a year, so the next year he won't be there. Then he took a cup of wine and gave thanks for it. Then he said, "Take this and share it among yourselves, for I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come." He took some bread and gave thanks for it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you." What's the note there? Which is given for you, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. Some manuscripts don't include that, but most do. "But here at this table, sitting among us as a friend, is the man who will betray me, for it has been determined that the Son of Man must die. But what sorrow awaits the one who betrays him?" The disciples began to ask each other which of them would ever do such a thing. Then they began to argue among themselves about who would be the greatest among them. Jesus told them, "In this world the kings and great men lord it over their people, yet they are called friends of the people. But among you it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. Which is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? The one who sits at the table, of course, but not here. For I am among you as one who serves." He was serving them. He was breaking the bread. He was pouring the wine. He was doing the serving. And he even washed their feet. In other Gospels, he talks about how he washed their feet. "You have stayed with me in my time of trial. And just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I now grant you the right to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel." Wow. Simon predicts Peter's denial. "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail." And this is important. "So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." Okay. Now, Peter was the very first person he called, the very first disciple. When he first started his walk, he went to Peter and said, "Come with me, I will make you fishers of men." So no one was this in longer as Peter, and he loved Peter. And he knew what he was going to do, so he already said, he had already forgiven him. Said, "So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." Of course, Peter said, "Lord, I am ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you." But Jesus said, "Peter, let me tell you something. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." Wow. Then Jesus asked them, "When I sent you out to preach the good news and you did not have any money, a traveler's bag, or an extra pair of sandals, did you need anything?" "No," they replied. "But now," he said, "take your money and a traveler's bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. For the time has come for this prophecy about me to be fulfilled. He was counted among the rebels. Yes, everything written about me by the prophets will come true." "Look, Lord," they replied, "we have 2 swords among us." "That's enough," he said. Jesus prays on the Mount of Olives. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to temptation." He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will be done, not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently as he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell from the ground like great drops of blood. Now, it has been verified that if you are absolutely terrified, you can sweat drops of blood. The blood will mix with your sweat. Okay? And it's also important to notice that a lot of the old manuscripts didn't include 43 and 44. But they found it in enough places to include it here. So. At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you not give in to temptation." Jesus betrayed and arrested. But even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus to greet him with a kiss. But Jesus said, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" The kiss of death. Remember, that's where that come from. When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, "Lord, should we fight? We have brought the swords." And one of them struck at the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this," as he touched the man's ear and healed him. Okay. Now, Luke would notice this because he's a doctor. Okay. None of the other ones wrote about this, but he did write about it. A doctor would notice such things. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. "Am I some dangerous revolutionary," he asked, "that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns." Right. Peter denies Jesus. So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home. And Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it. And Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man is one of Jesus' followers." But Peter denied it. "Woman," he said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them." "No, I am not," Peter retorted. About an hour later, someone else insisted, "This must be one of them because he is a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." And immediately, as he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Wow. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. Can you even imagine? Right as that happens, Jesus, whom you followed for 3 years, turns around and looks at you. His very first follower, his very first disciple. I can't even imagine that kind of guilt. The guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and said, "Prophesy to us. Who hit you that time?" And they hurled all sorts of terrible insults at him. They'll get theirs, huh? Jesus before the council. At daybreak, all the elders of the people assembled, including the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. Jesus was led before this high council. What's that note say? Before the Sanhedrin. That's what they were called. And they asked us, "Tell us, are you the Messiah?" But he replied, "If I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand." They all shouted, "So you are claiming to be the Son of God?" And he replied, "You say that I am." Now, I am, he said the words, "I am." They never said that out loud. That was the name of God, okay? And even they never said it out loud out of supposed reverence for God. This made them really angry. And in other Gospels, it says the leader actually tore his robe in half, which they don't do. Robes were made out of the entire robe was made out of a single piece of cloth, woven that way. And they were very expensive and took years to make. So the fact that he tore it shows how angry he was. Okay. That was in other Gospels. But this one says, "Why do we need other witnesses?" They said, "We ourselves heard him say it." He said that I am. He said he was God right there. So that's Luke 22. A lot happened in this chapter. Okay. We have and any one of these things could be an entire study all into itself. Judas betraying Jesus, the Last Supper, communion. Okay, Peter's denial. And the fact that Peter was the first disciple. And he said in other places that the church will be found on you, Peter. You will be the rock. Yeah. Praise on the Mount of Olives. Some Gospels say he went up 2 or 3 times. He went up to pray, came back, found them asleep, went up again to pray, came back, found them asleep again. And then the gang showed up to cause trouble. So, yeah, that's the whole thing. Jesus betrayed and arrested. Peter denies Jesus. Jesus before the council. So, that is the whole thing. We have 2 chapters left. And we know what's going to happen in those 2 chapters, but we'll read it. Good stuff. It gets bad, and then it gets good. So, but we'll finish that on Christmas Eve, and then we'll read 2 and 3 again. Just to get Christmas spirit back in. Where he's born. So, until next time, remember, be kind, give to the poor. See you next time.